and Sukabumi exists directly beneath that reminder, which is why its identity is never fully flat or static. It has depth built into its everyday existence. That depth is not always dramatic, it is often extremely ordinary. A child walking home from school, a vendor closing a stall at dusk, a motorbike passing through streets that have seen the same motion repeated thousands of times before. Ordinariness, repeated long enough, becomes something else entirely. It becomes memory structure, and that is where Sukabumi quietly wins against time. Not by changing faster than other places, but by repeating itself long enough to become unforgettable. Even its contradictions strengthen this effect. A city small in scale, yet large in layered meaning. A transit point that behaves more like a destination in memory. A place often passed through, yet rarely left behind mentally. A modern administrative city that still carries deep traces of older cultural logic. These contradictions are not problems to be solved, they are how Sukabumi remains alive, because resolution would actually make it smaller, but unresolved harmony keeps it expanding. And perhaps that is why even its myths persist so naturally. The black stone at Stadion Surya Kencana Road remains part of local imagination, not because it demands belief, but because it anchors continuity between explanation and mystery. Jalan Karamat in Gunung Puya continues to be respected because it connects geography with inherited awareness. Curug Cikaso continues to be spoken about in both natural and spiritual language because it exists at the intersection of interpretation and reality. Nothing needs to be proven because everything is already experienced, and experience is stronger than proof. Even Sukabumi's cultural identity reflects this quiet endurance. The mochi tradition continues not because it is marketed aggressively, but because it is remembered and shared. The angkot system continues not because it is the newest innovation, but because it still works within the logic of the city. Local life continues not because it is optimized, but because it is sustained. And sustainability, in its most human form, is not about efficiency. It is about continuity of presence. That is what Sukabumi understands without needing to explain it, and that is what makes it difficult to fully translate into simple descriptions, because every attempt to reduce it removes something essential, not information, but feeling. So in the end, after all layers have been spoken, after all details have been traced, after all history, myth, culture, and geography have been unfolded, Sukabumi remains exactly what it always was, not fully defined, not fully finished, not fully contained, but fully present. A place that does not rely on being constantly seen to exist, a place that does not need to be exaggerated to matter, a place that continues whether or not it is being described. And that is the quiet, final truth of Sukabumi. It is not trying to stay in your memory, but once it enters, it does not leave. It simply stays and continues, just like the city itself. And even here, at what feels like the edge of language, Sukabumi still refuses to become a closed conclusion, because Sukabumi was never built to end neatly in interpretation. It was built to remain in motion, even when everything about it appears still. The streets may look familiar, the mountains may look constant, the routines may look repetitive, but repetition is not stagnation here. It is continuity disguised as simplicity. Every return to the same road is not the same experience. Every morning light over the same rooftops is not identical. Every journey through the same angkot routes carries slightly different weight depending on who is living it, who is leaving it, who is remembering it. That is how Sukabumi quietly resists being reduced. It changes without announcing change. It evolves without breaking its own rhythm. And that is why it lingers, because the human mind does not easily forget places that feel alive in this way. Not because they are loud, but because they are consistent enough to become part of internal reference, a quiet standard you compare other places to without realizing it. Even its relationship with Mount Gede Pangrango reinforces this final understanding. Mountains do not explain themselves, they simply remain visible long enough for human life to pass beneath them. And Sukabumi exists in that passing, not as a disruption, but as a companion to it. And maybe that is what makes it so difficult to finish describing, because every attempt to finalize it feels slightly incorrect, as if something is still happening just outside the frame, as if the city has not agreed to be fully summarized. So instead of an ending, what remains is awareness, that Sukabumi is not a story you complete, it is a place you keep returning to in thought, long after the physical distance has grown. A place that becomes clearer in memory than it ever was in the moment. A place that does not insist on importance, but proves it through endurance, through repetition, through presence, through time that continues without interruption, and through people who continue their lives within it without needing to frame their existence as part of something larger, because they already are. And that is the final truth that no amount of description can fully exhaust. Not that Sukabumi is extraordinary in a dramatic sense, but that it is continuous in a human sense. And continuity, once truly understood, does not feel like a concept anymore. It feels like a place that is still breathing, still existing, still moving forward quietly under the same sky. And even now, as this monologue reaches what looks like an end, Sukabumi does not end with it. It simply continues, as it always has, as it always will.